Hi, I'm Ian Helms, and this is SEO in 2025.
Ian, what's your number one SEO tip for 2025?
My SEO tip for 2025 is that AI doesn't need to get better, but rather SEOs and marketers need to get better at using AI and understanding its limitations.
Okay, but I presume you think that AI is going to get better.
I am optimistic that it will continue to get better and learn and evolve, of course, but as with everything and just the general way that AI currently is and continues to learn from existing information or even from itself, it has lots of limitations and lots of bias and lots of other nuances that I think people both fault it for in some ways, but also ignore when they use it in other ways as well too. And I feel like people put AI on this pedestal and hold it to a way higher standard than they would another human maybe that's producing content or writing something. When in reality, there's honestly almost exactly the same mistakes and honestly the exactly same, very similar biases and everything else that come from a human writing content versus AI writing content because AI learned from the humans that wrote the content to begin with.
Okay, that's a great point. So how do you maximize the potential of the current state of AI?
So for me, it's using as many tools as possible that are available and that, you have budget for. Obviously, that's a limitation, I think, in many ways to some folks accessing and using AI on a regular basis. But for different projects, for different initiatives, I use various AI tools and try and learn as much as possible from each of those, what they're best at, what they're not good at, and kind of how to mix them together to create the most positive outcome and the most efficient result in my day-to-day wherever possible.
Are you able to share some of the tools that you use and maybe talk a little bit about the strengths and limitations of those tools?
Yeah. So predominantly I use OpenAI's ChatGPT 4.0. I pay for the premium version of ChatGPT, which is great for, I use it for lots of different things in my personal life, but also at work from an SEO perspective. Things like writing alt text for images. It's really great at that. We are testing some new plugins for WordPress and things that are going to be potentially helping us with writing alt text for images. But in the meantime, taking a screenshot of even honestly like a group of thumbnails has been really successful in me optimizing my time when it comes to writing alt text for images. Same with meta titles and meta descriptions and things as well. Perplexity is another one that I've been using a decent amount when it comes to writing content that requires more sources and other quotes and citations that certain AI tools don't necessarily have access to or aren't providing in other ways. I've used Jasper a decent amount. Their chat feature is really nice, and they have a really solid dashboard when it comes to organizing the content and projects that you're working on. And then I've used Writer and Dolly for pictures. I've done a few versions of data analysis with different AI tools to varying degrees of success. So that's again one that we can maybe get into a little bit later as well. But I don't necessarily always trust AI when it comes to data analysis yet.
Okay, well, I mean, you've highlighted a few strengths there. I love the producing alt text, and obviously meta descriptions, titles as well was a strength as well. But data analysis, why do you feel that that's a major limitation?
I would say it's less of a limitation in the sense of I've had really great success when it comes to giving it some data and saying, can you look at these and find commonalities, like a spreadsheet? Can you look at the spreadsheet and find commonalities between these keywords or these links or this data, these performance reports, etc. But when it comes to giving actual accurate calculations of that data or actual accurate comprehensive sort of output surrounding all of that, that's where it usually seems limited. it'll give you a generalization around some of the terms and topics. For example, if you give it a bunch of keywords and ask it to cluster them, it won't necessarily always give you every single opportunity or option. It'll maybe highlight the top 3 and you have to follow up, or you ask.
So is that an issue with the prompts potentially, or is it simply because there are occasionally hallucinations?
That's a great question. I think it's a little bit of both, which is definitely a part of my tip about getting better at using AI, is that they're knowing how to prompt ahead of time to get what you want is definitely a critical component to using AI more effectively. But when it comes to numbers in particular, I feel like it definitely struggles with giving an accurate response. Like, I've given it paid social data before and said, can you help me create a chart or easy to digest graph for like a executive summary for a report that I'm working on. And it doesn't necessarily always create the graph accurately. It doesn't always necessarily take the right numbers from the right columns correctly. It doesn't necessarily average them, the full set of data. It might take a sample of it. And so I don't know. I don't necessarily know because I haven't fully cracked the code on it. So maybe that's, again, my limitation on fully understanding and using correctable tools.
Have you ever tried making a custom GPT, or are you just using the native version?
I haven't. That's something that I have yet to explore, and there's lots of them out there right now. I think that's what scared me away from creating my own from the at the beginning, was that so many people were churning out new GPTs and other like tools that I didn't necessarily want to reinvent a wheel that was already being invented somewhere. But it's a compelling thought that I might have to explore.
It is. I mean, I've talked to someone about what they do, and they're finding success by creating custom GPTs that are very task-specific focused. So you have one GPT to do something, and then once it's finished, then pass the data over to another GPT to complete a different task. And because they're not mixing tasks, they're apparently less likely to hallucinate and produce bad data.
Yeah, and that's definitely a takeaway from some of the things that I've learned is, rather than giving a full export from Google Analytics or a full export from your keyword research tool, slice it into the different columns that you actually want it to focus on, or only provide the data that you really truly want analyzed, because then it will know exactly which column that you're referring to, because there's only so many columns that it can look at. That's definitely been something that I have had more success with in doing, because it is like, that's just like a general AI takeaway. I feel like if you can be as specific as possible and as like focused as possible, I guess is a better word for it, that's when you usually get the best results from leveraging an AI tool.
Are there any other tips that you can offer to work smarter with the use of AI? Obviously, you talked about being great with your prompts. Anything else you'd like to add there?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I saw a tweet from Lily Ray recently mentioning how she used ChatGPT to ask questions that she wasn't able to necessarily search in Google well. And I found it kind of ironic because I know she kind of doesn't always speak well about AI and AI tools in many ways. But at the same time, that's something that I do a lot. Like another use case that I didn't mention earlier that I like to leverage ChatGPT for is to help write schema markup for different pages. I'm not super familiar with all of the ins and outs of schema, and I'm in a newer world to me where there's different types of schema markup that I haven't seen before. And so knowing what's required, knowing what's not required, knowing how to format the different pieces, the different components of the markup properly has been something that I've never really gotten explained well from a YouTube video or a long form written document. Like, there's lots of sites that explain schema, but like it's always been a foreign language to me. And I actually learned significantly more about schema markup in the time that I was able to actually ask a specific use case, a specific example that I was trying to get into and uncover. same with like other HTML code reviews. If I'm looking for what might be wrong with a particular web page or something else, like actually uploading the code and you having it look at it and point out the exact line or whatever has been extremely useful for me. That was like a way deeper version of my answer to your question, but hopefully that, I don't know if I fully answered it though.
Yes, absolutely. But I mean, I like the fact that you also talk about using AI as a bit of a buddy, a bit of a teacher as well. So it's not just about asking it to do tasks, it's getting its opinion on how you should actually do the task more effectively.
Exactly. Yeah. I recently moved from, not recently, I guess I've been here for 2 years now. When I transitioned from agency world to an in-house role, that was one of my biggest like concerns going into my new role, not having direct access to all of these other SEO experts and all these other content marketers and all of the other folks at the agency who I could normally just send a little Slack message to and get a bunch of opinions on. And so ChatGPT truly has been a little bit of a buddy. Yeah, I guess to use your word. I don't use it to brainstorm very often. It's usually I have an idea or I have a thought and I'm just trying to like figure out how to take the first step or put something into action or just validate whether or not it's even a good idea or not at all. And it has enough background knowledge because of how it's built to usually point me in a positive direction or help me get to that first step.
Do you have any thoughts on how SEO should incorporate AI into their workflow? I mean, how often should AI be used? Should it be used with other tools, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I use it daily. If I'm being like super frank, I use it not just daily, like multiple times a day. The funny part about my current role is that it's not funny. The interesting part about my current role is that I work in LGBTQ plus media. And one thing that AI struggles with and has a lot of bias around and mixed information on, if you will, are LGBTQ terms and what they mean and what the difference between gender and sex is and making sure that it doesn't mix those topics and things like that. And so we still very much rely on human writers and human experience and human perspectives to create the content that we're writing every day. And a lot of our sites are news focused sites. So they're writing about things that have never even happened before.
Yeah, or cutting edge, so the AI wouldn't know about. Yeah.
Exactly. And so for those cases, what I like to do is like once that moment in time becomes historical and searchable and something that is more established, I can use AI and I can combine it with like top ranked pages and have AI compare the original article to other top ranked articles and see what we might be missing. I can incorporate obviously my personal other human experiences into understanding what also might be missing, but then using it to help write metadata or meta descriptions, meta titles, helping it identify areas of opportunity for incorporating more EEAT signals and just other general like day-to-day things. I know I mentioned earlier keyword research. I don't usually use ChatGPT or any other AI tools for keyword research, but I do like to use them once I have keywords in mind to kind of help ideate like what I might be doing with that post or how I might be able to communicate best with one of those human writers that I work with to ensure that they're producing the most optimized content from a SEO perspective, but by obviously then incorporating the true human touch and everything else that's required to provide value.
If an SEO is struggling for time, what should they stop doing right now so they can spend more time making better use of AI in 2025?
I'd say that they need to stop thinking about it if they're debating and actually just do it. So I think it's like 88% of marketers currently use AI in their day-to-day from the most recent studies that I was looking at from, I think, SurveyMonkey it was. And that means that there's at least 12% of marketers and SEOs out there that aren't using it, that just I don't know if they're afraid or not, or worried about whether or not it's going to stay around or not, but this has been a conversation that's been happening for years now at this point. And if you're not ready to use it, you need to be ready to use it. If you're not using it to its full potential, you should start using it to its full potential. And if you're just like unsure where to start, like there's usually nothing that would hold you back from using a free tool. ChatGPT is free. There's a free version for everyone to play with. So you won't even know until you start, even if it's just asking for recipe ideas for your meal tonight. You can just jump in and start to learn the limitations and ways that you can maximize it in your own day-to-day.
Ian Helms is Director of Growth Marketing at Q Digital. You can find him over at q.digital. Ian, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2025.
Thank you so much, David.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2025, the book, over at SEOin2025.com.